Quilts are more than just pieces of fabric sewn together. They can tell some amazing stories. Hi, I'm Lenny Wagner, President of the Historical Society of Moorestown, and welcome to Smith-Cadbury Mansion, our headquarters. Today we're going to talk about our latest exhibit, Inscribed Quilts, a portal to Moorestown history. Linda Vesey, who's the curator and creator of the exhibit, will walk you through some of the highlights.
Quilts tell an amazing story. They lead us into a world of history that would otherwise have been stored away up in the attic. I'm Linda Vesey. I'm the curator of the exhibit at the Historical Society of Moorestown. The signatures on these quilts are going to take us on an incredible journey. This quilt was made for Anna Warrington. Anna Warrington was married in 1843. She grew up in this beautiful house, which still stands today right off of New Albany Road. And one of the signers was her cousin, Keziah Gillingham. Keziah lived on the other side of New Albany Road. Unfortunately, her house is not here anymore. Keziah married a young man named Chalkley Gillingham. Chalkley was the secretary of the Burlington County Agricultural Society. He and a group of investors from Chester Township bought a section of land along the Delaware River. He brought in an architect from Philadelphia named Samuel Sloan, and they laid out the town of Riverton. This was the first planned suburb in the United States. For his efforts, he was given a section of land in order to build a house, but Chalkley's business acumen and his sights were far beyond Riverton. He formed a company with two uncles and a man named Jacob Troth. It was known as the Troth-Gillingham Company. And together, they bought 2,000 acres of Mount Vernon. This is the Mount Vernon that belonged to George Washington. The first thing they did was to clear the 2,000 acres of all the timber. The timber was sold to shipbuilders up and down the East Coast. Then they brought all the farming innovations that they had developed in New Jersey down to the Alexandria area. They wanted to show the South that they did not need slaves to farm, that there were better methods. They set up small farming opportunities for freed black slaves. They built schools for them. They educated them. They established churches for them. And this all took place a decade before the Civil War. The Gillinghams also gave the land for the Woodlawn Meeting House, which is still in use today. When we began this research and we realized that part of our story took place on George Washington's Mount Vernon, it really sounded like a reach. So we started doing some investigation and we called down to the Woodlawn Meeting House and spoke to the historian there. She said to me, those aren't the only two people from Moorestown that came down and settled in the Woodlawn section of Mount Vernon. So she emailed us a list, and we realized that some of the other residents who had moved down there had signed another quilt that we had in the collection. Keziah and Chalkley Gillingham, along with some of the other signers, lived the last years of their life down in the Alexandria area. They are buried in the burial grounds behind the Woodlawn Meeting House. When you walk through the exhibit, you're going to see the Stiles family Bible. One of the births that's recorded in the Bible is the birth of Levi B. Stiles. Levi spent his young years in Moorestown and then, with his wife, traveled down to Virginia and set up a farm in the Woodlawn Plantation. Because Woodlawn was on the border between the North and the South, they were a prime target for Confederate guerrillas to raid the farms for horses, wagons, and other supplies. One night, Chalkley Gillingham gets a call that, sure enough, there's been a raid. He assembles the home guard. They find 4 Union soldiers who are on picket duty, and they go off on horseback looking for all the items that had been stolen by the Confederate guerrillas. They track them down. They find them in a thicket of laurel. They're getting ready to shoot, and who do they see? but Levi B. Stiles, who had been kidnapped along with the horses and the wagons. Chalkley, in his diary, in a very Quakerly succinct manner, says that Levi was very pleased to be liberated. Sometimes a signature such as Keziah's leads to volumes of information, and sometimes when we look at a signature, we only get a glimpse about the person who signed it. For instance, Anna's grandmother was Atlantic Bispham Houghton. Atlantic, as the story goes, was born at sea and named by the captain of the ship. Abby Walton, who signed the quilt, taught English at a school in Philadelphia. One Saturday, she goes down to Fort Mifflin and takes a hot air balloon ride to Wilmington, Delaware. She writes that it took 20 minutes, which is a lot faster than driving down 95 today. Miriam Venable, who also attended Anna's wedding, actually voted in 1807, just prior to women losing the right to vote here in New Jersey. She's buried just off of Main Street at the cemetery behind the Episcopal Church. Mary S. Lippincott attended Anna's wedding. She signed the quilt. Mary opened a boarding school for girls on Main Street in Moorestown. She was a Quaker minister and was also able to travel to various meeting houses up and down the East Coast. She was a prolific letter writer, often referencing current events that we probably wouldn't even think about today if we didn't have her letters. In 1859, she traveled to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Several months before she arrived there, John Brown, an abolitionist from the North, and a group of men raided the armory in Harper's Ferry. Robert E. Lee and his soldiers arrested them, and he was held for trial. In her letter on December 1st, 1859, Mary Lippincott writes, "I suppose another day will decide the fate of poor John Brown." Brown was convicted and sentenced to be hung. He was hung the day after she wrote that letter. We have 5 beautiful quilts on display. You have heard just some of the stories of 2 of the quilts, so please come in and see the other quilts and hear their stories. Our research is continuing, so check your attics. You very well may have a quilt that has a story to tell.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for joining us on this quick tour of our latest exhibit. Please come out to the Historical Society of Moorestown. We hope to see you soon.